digital age. Okay, so to be a last speaker on these panels is some disadvantages and some advantages. Disadvantages is that this is a half of the audience, maybe, and the advantage is that everything has been said. So I don't have to do much. I can only repeat many things, but I will try to do it more from the Czech perspective, let's say. So before I go to this project, I would like to give you some overview. For many of you, I'm sure this is something you know, but for those of you who are not quite familiar with this, so let's go a little bit about the Czech history. This is the map of the Czech Republic with the territorial distribution of the responsibilities of various Jewish communities. So before the war, Czechoslovakia had 350,000 Jews, and it had 152 communities, congregations. After the war, it was only something like 30,000 people with 52 communities. This is a situation in, let's say, 1945 to 1948. And during the times of communist rule, it came more or less to the numbers we have today. That means today we have officially, and we had some discussions these past 2 days about this, officially we have 3,000 people who are registered and 10 Jewish communities. So you see now where are the 10 Jewish communities, and you see that this is a very uneven distribution. It's absolutely not balanced, because Prague Jewish community, which is in the center over there, is responsible for southern Bohemia and for eastern Bohemia, and then Brno is responsible for most part of Moravia, etc., etc. But on the contrary, if you see the north, so there are some communities which are quite small, but these are people who came only after the war, and this is the territory of the so-called Sudetenland, which somehow is correlating what we have said yesterday with the situation in Poland, which was Eastern Prussia. Now it's absolutely politically different. So this is again the distribution of the communities, and this is how Czechoslovakia was looking like in between 1980 and 1938. So you see that this is three parts. It's the Czech Republic, it's Slovakia, and then you have a small part in the east called the Carpathian Ukraine. And not only that this state was, as a result of the First World War, artificially designed, though in historical borders, but it was also having a completely different population. So if we are speaking about Prague and maybe Bratislava, we have more or less the same situation as we have heard now in Budapest. So were the Jews. The Jews were very much, I wouldn't say assimilated, but in America they prefer to speak about integration, so okay, integrated. But exactly, Christmas trees in every household. But in the east, in the Carpathian Ukraine, it was a completely different situation. They had these shtetls. In the Czech part and in the Moravian part, we cannot speak about shtetls. But in the east, yes, these were shtetls. And this is the story of this man who was living in there in Mukachevo, and he was always traditionally dressed. And he had the kaftan, and he had the streimel, and he had the payot. And one day he decided that he would go to Paris. So he goes to Paris, he steps out of the train, and people are staring at him, saying, "Wow, what is it?" And he says, "What are you staring at? You never saw a Czechoslovak?" So this was the situation there. And of course, it had many, many Jewish sites. So we have, when we started, and we didn't speak about that, and unfortunately we don't have the framework for it. But one part of my job was the restitution of Jewish property after the fall of communism, which was not an easy job, I can tell you. I was covering, of course, the Czech Republic, but there are Jewish landmarks all over former Czechoslovakia. Here, because we are starting with Czechoslovakia, so I started with, Maroš would tell you, this is Bratislava, and what happened with this one, it happened this. So you have the Coronation Church in Bratislava, next to it was a synagogue. Today you have only the Coronation Church where the Habsburgs were coronated, and the synagogue vanished in 1969. And instead of that, you have this. You know, and it's leading to the bridge, which you see in the back. So speaking about Czechoslovakia, and I spoke about the so-called Carpathian Ukraine, here is something which is also very important, because this is Uzhhorod, one of the capitals of Carpathian Ukraine. This was more or less, from the Jewish point of view, a neolog community. But you could find in these shtetls, as I said, also very, let's say, Hasidic or Orthodox communities, unlike Prague, unlike Moravia. So, from the political point of view, this is Czechoslovakia as it was distributed. And then, maybe we have to do a little trip into the Czech or Czechoslovak history. In the 14th century, basically, the Bohemian Czech kings, and two of them were also the emperors of the German Reich, invited the Germans, invited to these territories which were absolutely underdeveloped, and they invited them to produce more skills and to inhabit these territories which were vacant. It was void, so there was nobody, it was forests, and they came and they cultivated these territories. And they were there for 600 years. After 600 years, they were always trying to be independent. They got some independence from various rulers, from the Habsburgs, from who knows whom. In the end, as a result of the First World War, 1918, Czechoslovakia was created in these borders, and they were not called the Sudeten Germans. They were calling themselves the Bohemian Germans. They were thriving for some kind of a independence. They were never granted it. The Czechoslovak state became a centralized state because there were many minorities. There were Slovaks, there were Czechs as a major society, but there were also Jews, there were Hungarians, there were Carpato-Russinians, etc., etc. But it was a centralized state. And this disillusion, this disappointment from the side of the so-called Sudeten German led to the fact that they aligned with the Nazis. And now we have a result of Munich Agreement. This is the Munich Agreement. Actually, this is shortly before the Munich Agreement. This is the so-called Second Republic, where you see also the Carpathian Ukraine is still there. But the Munich Agreement is actually a crucial point in the history of the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia. And here I come to a point, because we are speaking about Jewish sites, and this is a fact which is not so much known. So I was visiting, and we were with Ruth in Berlin in one of the conferences, and I think it was the UN envoy on anti-Semitism appeared there, and it was an anniversary of the Kristallnacht. And she spoke about Kristallnacht was such a disaster, we all know, and it happened in Germany and Austria. And I came to her and I said, okay, if you are saying that it happened in Germany and Austria and you are not mentioning Czechoslovakia, basically you are supporting the idea of Munich Agreement. Because Poland is a little different story, you know, but it's related. So, of course, you have Königgrätz or all these. So Kristallnacht did not happen only in Austria and Germany. 7 minutes. So the point is, and Ruth did some work instead of me, because we really had thousands of these Jewish sites. Today we have 350 cemeteries, we have 200 synagogues, and we does not mean the community. And many of them have been destroyed during the Kristallnacht. And I have here some images which I will go very quickly because I don't have time. So for instance, this one. This is Heb-Eger, beautiful synagogue. It says that Jews are not welcome in Eger, and today you have only the memorial plaque there. Then Reichenberg, Liberec, also beautiful, beautiful synagogue. This is an image of the Kristallnacht. Today there is a library, and on the left side you see this building, which is the only synagogue which has been constructed after the Velvet Revolution in our country as a new synagogue. It's standing on the site of the former synagogue. Next to it is a Jablonec. Here is a virtual reconstruction of the synagogue. This is how it looked like. Today we don't have it anymore. Aussig, this is an image from the Kristallnacht again. Bemiš-Lajpa, Česká Lípa is the same. This is how it happened. Today we have only the memorial plaque. Děčín is the only one which remains standing, and here somebody mentioned it, I think Maroš spoke about it. You have always to have some site where the community can meet, not only the community, general public. So this remains standing. It's one of the landmarks of the city today. This is the interior. Here, very famous Karlsbad, Karlovy Vary, unfortunately gone. Next to it, Marienbad, Mariánské Lázně, gone. So you have only the memorial plaque there. Francesbad, this is all these spas of Western Bohemia, all of it is gone. Teplice, this is the birthplace of my mother, one of the landmarks, one of the most beautiful synagogues in the country, maybe in Europe, gone. This is how it looked. This is the interior. Today we have only the memorial there. Bemiš-Budweis, this is where the original Budweiser comes from. Okay, so, and this is the synagogue during the Kristallnacht. Then we have many other examples which I don't have the time to go. It's Moravia, it's not only Bohemian part. All these images are quite devastating. Okay, and now I'll go to the 10 Stars project. So, as Ruth was mentioning during this conference several times, we started to reconstruct what have been left in early 90s. We started with those what we were able to get back, which, as I said, in many cases was not so easy, but we were successful in the end. And the question was what to do with that. And there was a big discussion inside of the Jewish community because our resources were absolutely limited. And when we had some resources, so we were saying we have to invest into living people, not into stones, because our main priority is to support the life of Jewish community, not the past. The result of this discussion is a compromise. The compromise is saying we will go into the reconstructions of these sites only there where we have a co-funding. That means if there is a partner who is willing to invest together with us, so we go into it. And we were successful in getting many municipalities, regional authorities, other institutions who, and here maybe I have to say, and Ruth mentioned that, we are in a little different situation. For various purposes where we unfortunately do not have the time to go into, the Czech society, the Czech today population is embracing Jewish legacy as their own legacy. It's nothing alien, unlike, let's say, our surrounding countries. They see the Jewish history as a part of their own history. It is linked with the history of the 20th century, the common enemies, the Nazis, fight against the Germans, if you want, etc., etc. During communism, the Jewish community was always in the forefront of the dissident movement, and etc., etc. So this is a topic which can be discussed at some other occasion, but it's a reality, it's a fact. So we, in a way, we had much more easier situation than if you would build somewhere on a green grass without helping from anybody. So the 10 Stars project is exceptional in one sense. We were able to get not only co-funding, but the whole 100% funding from the European Union. This is the only project, the so-called network project, which has been subsidized by the European Union, and it was also from the very beginning controlled and guided from the European Union. Not the reconstruction itself, but also the financial part of it. So and as Ruth mentioned, these 10 stars, this is 10 Jewish sites around the Czech Republic, which are offering to the public not only the Jewish history, but also they are used for local purposes. In the case of Jewish history, of course, we had to bring some kind of a content. So in every synagogue, there is an exposition which contains also the regional Jewish history, but some other topics. So we have Jewish entrepreneurs, we have Jewish architects, we have Jewish learning, Jewish education, etc., etc. And the idea is that if this is scattered all around the country, so if you would come into one of the sites, you are eager to see the remaining 9. We even distributed a passport, which if you have a stamp on one side, so you can get some kind of a reduced price, which is anyway quite symbolic, in the other 9. We are not so, we thought that it would be more people coming, but we are on the level of the expectation, so to say. Because we are targeting on Czech audiences, because Prague is like Venice, we heard that. We had also 10 million visitors in a year in Prague, and in the Jewish Museum of Prague we have the same situation as in Berlin. We have 700,000 people coming in. But Prague is obvious. Of course we are advertising Prague also, but we are trying to get people also outside of Prague, because the Jewish history and the Jewish legacy is as important as in Prague. So here, remaining my time, I will go quickly with these sites, and you will see, and though it's of course not in color, it's blue and yellow, but at least you will see something, I hope. So what was it before and how it looks now? So first is Boskovice, the synagogue. This is how it. This is after reconstruction already, but Boskovice was reconstructed independently. But next to it is a school, which was a Jewish school, and this was in this shape. And now this is the inside of the synagogue. Next one is Brandeis. Maybe some of you know Brandeis, the Brandeis University. Judge Brandeis is a very important figure in the Jewish, but also in the Czech history, because he was the one who was able to get President Masaryk to President Wilson. So Brandeis is, this is how it looked like, and this is how it looks now. This is the interior, how it looks now. Březnice, not far from Prague, not so much known. This is a preserved ghetto, and this is how it looks now. This is the interior. Jičín, also very famous site. Karl Kraus was born there. Bashevi, and very rich Jewish history. Next to it is this school, and inside it looked like this, or like this. Now it's the situation as follows. Here we are in the north of the country, next to Polish border, Hotzenplotz, Jägendorf. Today it has all Czech names. Also Blaha. Here is the synagogue Krnov. And Krnov was also Sudetenland, and this is how it looked like. This is how it looked after the war. It remained standing for some purpose. This is how it looked inside. Now it's the situation as this. Mikulov, Nikolsburg, also a border site with Austria, which means during the communist times it was a very observed city because they were fearing of agents coming from the west through the town, which was an absolutely stupid idea. But the synagogue is looking like this now. This is how it looked before. This is today's situation. Cerekev is a landmark of the city. There is nothing, only the synagogue. This is towering all around the region. And it looks now this. This was before, this is now. Plzeň, maybe you know Plzeň, the great synagogue, which is the second largest in Europe, but this is not the one. That one is inside a yard, a small old synagogue, which also has been reconstructed. This is the only community building which is used for religious purposes out of these 10 stars. And it looks now like this. This is the interior. It has 3 floors. Polna, the infamous site of the Hilsner affair, which was a blood libel affair, very much important for the Czech Jewish history, but also for the Czech history as such, with Masaryk involved in it. This was the situation before, now. And last but not least is Ústěk. So here maybe if I have 1 minute, I will give you a little story, and Ruth knows this. Ústěk looked like this, and this is the times, this is like in the 80s. And there was a small group of local activists who were protesting. There was also a demolition decree from the municipality, and that should be knocked down. The synagogue should have been knocked down. And these activists protested. They protested with the communist authorities. They said, no, we are not allowing this, which was an act of heroism. You know, to protest against something during communist times was life-threatening. At least they could have been imprisoned. In the end, they were not, because the Velvet Revolution came. So it was saved, and now it's a gem. It's one of the most beautiful synagogues, the most I like most, actually. It looks like this. Next to it is a rabbinical house. You see, it's a complex. Well, that's, you know, the disadvantage. Should have been red. Okay, so this is a very short trip around the Czech Republic. If you want to see more, visit us. And I'm actually a fan of the opera, and I'm going to the live broadcast of the Metropolitan, and in the end, always somebody says, it's nothing compares as if you would go to the Met. So I'm saying the same, nothing compares as if you would go to the sites of the 10 stars.